Daniel Entwistle vanished on May 3rd, 2003. He has never been found.
At the time, I was the Eastern Daily Press chief reporter for Yarmouth, but I was actually on holiday with my family in Tunisia at the time Daniel went missing. And the first I heard of it was when we turned on Sky TV in the hotel and we saw detectives outside Yarmouth police station. And obviously, I was very curious as to what it was all about.
After 12 years with no answers or solid leads, my cold case team are stepping in an effort to help the authorities with this difficult case. By re-examining old evidence, speaking to witnesses and collaborating with key investigators, we're hoping to bring new information to light. We've assembled a team of some of the most skilled investigators, criminologists and forensic scientists working today. They've aided countless cases through the years and are here to lend their expertise in an effort to solve this case once and for all. Clive Driscoll is a former Detective Chief Inspector with Scotland Yard. He has had many noted investigations over the course of his 40-year career. He has seen many cases like this one and understands its complexity. In addition, we've enlisted the help of noted crime journalist Nicola Tallant. Nicola has written on many high-profile cases in the course of her career and has a detailed knowledge of this case.
You have a population which moves because people come, say on holiday and go home.
If kids had taunted them to get up on the wall, one of them would have broken down at home.
The bike was there, but whether or not you can use that as a fair barometer for where he was, I've never been too sure on that.
Daniel was the middle child of Paul and David Entwistle. They lived on the Barrack estate here in Great Yarmouth, a coastal town 20 miles east of Norwich.
When I was placed at what was then called Greenacre School, the Great Yarmouth area was a very challenged area. There was a high degree of social need, a high degree of unemployment, a high degree of criminal activity, and it would have reached the sort of lowest percentile of any criteria you placed on it as a town.
There is a transient population because of the industries that are built up there. So you've got oil and gas, which means on the one hand there's a lot of wealth in Yarmouth because people are coming in, they're working for big industries, but then they're going out again. There's also a sense of quite a low-paid, low-skilled workforce. And historically, it's always been, described as a bit of a frontier town in a sense, because you've had sort of people coming and going. So it kind of can be a bit sort of rough around the edges in that sense, like a lot of English coastal towns are.
It's a very, very tough place. There is very little money there. There's a lot of, teenage pregnancy, and there's a lot of social issues going on there. So the Barrack estate not only would have been a tough estate, but it's in a very, very tough place.
But I've discovered there's another dark side to this deprived seaside town. Great Yarmouth, being a seaside resort, was a magnet of sort for sex offenders.
You have a population which moves because people come, say on holiday and go home. You have young people hanging around arcades. There's lots of arcades in Great Yarmouth. I use the thing that if people will put themselves in a position to offend, so going somewhere where there are a large group of children, maybe out on their own, that are, in arcades which are known places where people who have sexual predators go to. Yeah, it was an area which he would have been in danger.
Daniel was a bright young boy who was often seen around the town with other children. He attended Greenacre First and Middle School, just a stone's throw from his home.
I'd spoken to the teachers at Daniel's school, and, he was, for their part, a normal little 7-year-old. He was very much part of the school family.
I always got the impression that he was a happy boy at home, loved his mum, particularly close to his mum, and when you saw him with his mum at school, you know, they appeared close. It appeared there was a good physical proximity. They worked closely together when they were playing games together, and you always got the impression that he was quite a happy boy in terms of home.
But the truth appears to be quite the opposite of the impression being made at school.
The rumour at the time amongst the journalists covering the case quite quickly was that Daniel Entwistle was either on the at-risk register or at least was on the radar of social services.
Behind the doors of this quiet family house were things all they should have been for the 7-year-old.
I used to play in his garden with him and stuff like that, obviously when his mum used to ask me to look after him. But my mum was his dinner lady, so obviously he used to come past mine. He'd be on the beach on his own, come past mine with a bucket full of sand, and then he'll speak to my mum. He used to always tell my mum stuff and how he hates being at home with his parents and stuff like that. And it's not something a child should say, really.
So he was a troubled kid, a vulnerable kid. It's become clear to me early in this investigation that Daniel wasn't just in danger because of where he lived or from the predatory people in and around the town. He was just as vulnerable in the place he should have been safest, his own home.
He seemed to have a lot of freedom for a 7-year-old. A lot of 7-year-olds play in the street. He was in an area which sadly has a history of paedophiles, really. There is a history in that area. He was in an area of danger, no doubt about that.
Daniel was a bit of a loner and, you know, maybe sometimes left to his own devices a bit, you know, roaming around, playing outside, but not untypical of a lot of other children probably in the neighbourhood.
He was always on his own. He used to go to the beach and sit on the beach for a good 2 hours, 3 hours maybe after school. He'd always be on the beach. Every time I used to walk my mum's dog, he'd be sitting there.
But it's also clear that Daniel wasn't just lonely. He was the victim of other kids.
Bullied all the time. All the time. There weren't a day. He was all right in school.
It's a Lord of the Flies, I think, sort of situation out there where children are making up their own rules and living their own culture.
I think we probably built up a picture that he was not untypical of the sort of children that live in that part of town.
In Daniel Entwistle, I've seen the picture of a boy very much at risk, a child left to fend for himself in a town where danger was all around. While his school appeared to be a refuge of sorts, his home life was not all it should have been. Daniel's situation was hugely vulnerable, and on that fateful day, some person or persons took advantage. Coming up, Daniel's last moments caught on CCTV. Did he drown, or did something much more sinister happen to him? 7-year-old Daniel Entwistle vanished on the afternoon of a bank holiday Sunday in the town of Great Yarmouth. Despite intensive investigations, no trace of his whereabouts has ever emerged. On this programme, we hope to gain a better understanding of what happened to Daniel Entwistle by revisiting the places he was last seen and by reconnecting with the original investigators assigned to the case. In the early stages of re-examining this case, I've discovered that Daniel was, incredibly for a boy of just 7 years of age, left to his own devices a great deal of the time. He was also bullied by other kids and left to roam around on his own. But the area he was wandering around was anything but safe. Because of reports of strange men hanging around the school grounds, people had been on alert in the area. Is it possible that Daniel might have been noticed by a predator? Parents of students attending the Greenacre school here were warned about strange men hanging around the place. It's understood that a number of sex offenders live nearby, and naturally, parents exercise a great deal of caution about the whereabouts of their kids.
There was certainly a feeling that and probably this was accurate, that there were certainly paedophiles resident in the vicinity of the school. And therefore the message that the school used to put across was that strangers were not always demon-looking with horns, as it were, but they were ordinary people who we didn't know. And that was the clearest definition of stranger that we knew. They were people that we didn't know. And that was put forward to children many, many times, and layered and layered and layered, so that, you know, you'd hope they would take it on.
Daniel's father, David, worked as a railwayman. His mother, Paula, suffered with epilepsy and was frequently unwell. In fact, she was bedridden the day Daniel went missing. It's become evident with the passing of time that no one was really watching Daniel that Sunday afternoon. The day of Daniel's disappearance had been largely unremarkable. Paula remembers him playing with some toys alongside his brother.
One of the sightings of him, there was a neighbourhood watch guy who said that, you know, he saw him slightly away from a group of other children, and that, you know, that's suggesting that perhaps he wasn't happy, and that some incident had happened, you know, with those kids.
Around 5 o'clock, David Entwistle gave Daniel the money to go to the local shop to buy some milk for his younger brother. What happened next remains shrouded in mystery.
Daniel actually went to the shop over the corner there and went to go and get, I don't know, some milk. Obviously never returned.
Daniel came to this shop to pick up a bottle for his baby brother John. According to his father David, he returned with the bottle and then went out to play. That was the last time he ever saw his son. CCTV footage confirms that Daniel was at Blenco's shop.
Quite a big thing for a 7-year-old to do, to be able to, you know, leave their own home and go down to the shop with some money, bring it back. I think there were a lot of children kind of hanging around and being away from their parents on the estate. So I think even for young children, even as young as 7, like Daniel, they would have been not indoors, but very much kind of just loitering around the area, even, you know, when they was at such a young age.
Later that evening, Daniel's red BMX will be found here on the banks of the River Yar. It will be the only piece of physical evidence found. Eyewitnesses reported seeing him in the company of other kids playing around the area before his disappearance. But what happened after they left the scene?
If you go to any park in any part of Britain or Ireland, you'll find bikes drawn all over the place and the kids miles away playing. So the bike was there, but whether or not you can use that as a fair barometer for where he was, I've never been too sure on that from investigations I've done. But it's a starting point, but I don't know if I would rely on that.
With a tidal river on one side and the coast on the other, Great Yarmouth can be a dangerous place for a young child. Was this a case of tragic misadventure? Was this a childish prank which went horribly wrong?
I mean, Yarmouth's prosperity essentially was built on the River Yar, because you had the inland port, and you can still go down there and see some of the ships where they docked. So it was an important river for the town and a sort of source of the economy. But also, I guess, it was a bit of a play spot for the children. And I guess, you know, people maybe didn't think about, you know, some of the dangers there, because, you know, kids could have easy access to the river. One of the things that I did think about when I went down to look was, well, were the tides strong enough to simply sweep someone away? I do remember asking that, or thinking that question, and not really being that convinced by the answer.
If Daniel did fall into the river, how come no one saw or heard anything? Surely he must have screamed out for help. How could a young boy vanish so abruptly? When it was realised that Daniel was nowhere to be found, the river was the first obvious area of concern.
We knew that some CCTV footage had been found at the newsagents, and I kind of thought, well, where was the gap between the newsagents and where the bike was found. So I went down the road near the cut-through at the river where his bike was left, and there was a petrol garage there, and I was looking to see if there were CCTV cameras there as well, because I thought, well, if there were, they may have seen either him or where he was moving, or maybe somebody else who was coming by, because there were lots of lorries coming through, sort of because of the oil and gas industry, so lots of deliveries being made. And it just occurred to me, you know, had somebody stopped, had they seen him, had they picked him up? So, you know, it was just kind of trying to make sense of what had happened. I think I went in and asked, actually, and spoke to the people in the garage and said, look, you know, had anybody seen anything? And, you know, they hadn't, but what they'd said was they were just as shocked as everybody else. I think it was also one of the questions that I asked the police as well, to say, look, well, did anything get picked up? And from memory, it was inconclusive in that sense, so it made me think, well, it seemed a bit odd that nobody had seen him coming out, so what happened?
But it quickly emerged that Daniel was unlikely to have gone too close to the river.
Like a lot of children growing up in areas which are surrounded by water, and Daniel actually couldn't swim, and of course he was only 7.
This young man was known to have a fear of the water. So had he done something stupid, it would have been out of bravado with his friends. There would have been witnesses to him falling in the river.
In a sense, it seems unusual or unlikely for him to sort of be, of his own volition, going down to the water's edge, down to the sea wall, you know, clearly an area that holds a danger in terms of water.
For me, if the boy simply falls into the water, I would have expected his body to have been recovered. Bodies can be washed out to sea, small bodies in particular, but there's usually some trace found eventually.
With drowning appearing to me to be more and more unlikely, I'm now back to what happened after Daniel visited the shop.
The last sighting of Daniel was in Blencoe's, the local shop. And after that, he's gone. All we have left is his bicycle.
There's two things here. Either he fell into the river by accident, or he somehow was a victim of something much more pernicious, snatched, abducted, or taken away. What do you think happened here, Clive?
I've always felt that that he was taken. I know the bike was found near the water, and I believe he was seen. But he had everybody that that was interviewed said that he had this real fear of water. It wasn't something he would have been rushing to get near. He seemed to have a fear of the sea, and in particular that river's a fast-running river. So I always felt that was more unlikely than it was likely that he was taken by somebody. But you couldn't rule that out, that it was just a tragic accident.
Walking near that wall, this is a kind of rite of passage for little kids. He was afraid of the water. Was there a sense that, is it possible that he, in the absence of any other observers, would have tried to negotiate this for himself?
I think that if that had happened, the chances of his body being discovered would have been, I think his body would have probably been discovered in the river. Or maybe if kids had taunted him to get up on the wall, one of them would have broken down at home and said what had happened.
So far as I'm concerned, the very real possibility is that Daniel was the victim of something far more sinister than an accident around the river on the afternoon he disappeared. But what happened and who was involved? Coming up, what kind of people was Daniel in contact with? Was he the victim of paedophiles in this seaside town? Seven-year-old Daniel Entwistle vanished without trace from his home in Great Yarmouth on a bank holiday Sunday afternoon. He has never been seen since. On this programme, I've been reinvestigating this disturbing disappearance. My cold case team has established that Daniel was afraid of the water and couldn't swim, making it a remote possibility that he was a victim of a prank or simply fell into the river. What is apparent, though, is that his life was far from normal and that he was a victim of bullying and neglect. He was also allowed too much freedom for a boy of his age and was generally at risk. He was particularly under threat from sex predators, who I now know lived in the area. So was Daniel's abduction, if that is what happened, a premeditated event, or did sex offenders simply take the opportunity and snatch him randomly? Shortly before he went missing, Daniel had run an errand for his father and was then seen with a group of children. What happened next, however, remains shrouded in mystery. I've pretty much established that he didn't fall into the river, nor does it appear that he might have been pushed. By all accounts, Daniel was afraid of water, and my cold case team believe that if he had been pushed, then someone would have spoken. But how do we explain his bike left at the scene? If the other children went home, why did Daniel stay behind? And were there really no other witnesses to the events surrounding his disappearance? If this was an abduction, or if he'd accidentally fallen into the river, how is it possible that there are no witnesses?
Well, you see, it's possible that the bike was left there at that scene in order to hamper an investigation. You know, maybe that wasn't the last place he actually was. You see in a lot of cases that people will try to skew an investigation in a particular way because that's what they want to do. And often they will actually leave things beside the sea or rivers, water, so it looks as if somebody has either committed suicide, now not in this case a child so young, or has fallen in.
My cold case team is starting to narrow things down, and the abduction of Daniel seems a real possibility.
Most abductions are usually by people who know. Paedophiles work incredibly hard to groom their victims. So, yes, there are children snatched, and that is always a massive problem. But there's also children that have fallen foul of people who actually know them and have known them, and they feel reasonably confident and comfortable to be with. So I think he would have been in danger, possibly more to people he would have known and maybe felt comfortable in than someone driving past and just bundling him into a car, which I know does happen.
The question is, did the other kids who might have picked on him know anything of Daniel's disappearance? And if he was the victim of someone who abducted him, how close to Daniel might that person have been? That's something no one is sure of. What is for sure, though, is that he went to this shop, which was formerly known as Blenco's. Not only was Daniel caught on camera by the shop's CCTV system, but many witnesses testified to seeing him in the shop and around the area shortly thereafter. But if so many people saw him before he disappeared, where were they all when he vanished? Is it possible he was lured away from the busier parts of the town? It's becoming clearer to me that Daniel may simply have been snatched.
This looks like much more an opportunistic abduction, and that abduction was probably much more motivated by the fact that somebody wanted to abduct him because they were interested in him sexually.
And from all the accounts I've heard, there was significant activity of a sinister nature happening in Great Yarmouth at the time.
Within a kilometre radius, 5 known paedophiles. That bank holiday weekend, which way did it go? Which way did it go?
This is a very attractive little boy. Everybody talks about his looks. He was very small, he was very frail. He would not have been able to have put up a fight. He was away from any guardian that could have protected him.
He was on CCTV in a shop. Then he disappears, and his bike is found back at the river. No, for me, this points to the fact he was snatched. A well-known paedophile ring operated in that area. He was a prime candidate for being snatched by them.
But was his abduction a random happening, or had Daniel been on someone's sexual radar for some time?
these people are very clever and that they can entice children however much you prime them beforehand.
Clive, if this was an abduction, would this be an abduction by one perpetrator or two?
I just feel when we talk abduction, I'm never too sure. You always get this image, don't you, of a child walking along and someone whipping up and picking them up. But if you're coerced into come and help my dog or come and feed my dog or whatever, you're coerced. That's equally an abduction. So that could be by someone who he knows, and once he's inside, you only got to look at the picture. He was quite tiny, he wouldn't be able to get out. So I feel this is more of a grooming type thing, which would be an abduction in a sort of a way.
So was Daniel the victim of an opportunist predator, or was there some sort of plan to snatch him? Both possibilities are horrifying for any parent to consider, but for Paula Entwistle, Daniel's mom, more horrifying news was to come. I've discovered that new evidence in the case underpins my views in our expert analysis, and it also shines a spotlight on just what was going on in the home of Daniel Entwistle. Coming up, a disturbing family secret. Recent revelations open up new possibilities in this tragic case. Schoolboy Daniel Entwistle vanished from his home in Great Yarmouth one bank holiday Sunday afternoon and was never seen again. His disappearance traumatized the local community, heightening local people's fears that their children too might now be at risk.
This was a hugely shocking thing for the whole of Norfolk, actually, because child disappearances are pretty rare. And they're certainly pretty rare in Norfolk.
There was obviously worried parents, because when a child disappears and there's no clue as to what's happened to him, people are worried that he may have been kidnapped. They are worried about, is it somebody within the community? There was also concern among the children at Daniel's school, because obviously, they're wondering where their sort of friend and classmate's gone.
That kind of thing really hangs like a cloud over an area for quite a long time afterwards.
As if the disappearance of Daniel wasn't upsetting enough, his mother, Paula, would discover something that would turn her world upside down and blow the case wide open. Her husband, David, was a convicted paedophile and had served a sentence for having sex with a 12-year-old girl. But there were even more shocking aspects to this revelation.
We subsequently discover that Daniel's father was someone who was in a paedophile ring.
But did David Entwistle's paedophile past have anything to do with Daniel's disappearance?
In my work with paedophiles, the one reality that strikes me time after time after time is that they do not just offend by themselves. They make contact via the internet with a range of other men, and it is by and large men who are paedophiles, who are interested in children. Would Daniel's father, someone convicted of paedophilia, have been in contact with other paedophiles? The chances of that seem to me to be highly likely based on the behavior of paedophiles who will try to reach out through the internet to other men who have similar tastes and similar interests. And they will share information with each other about children that can be groomed, about children who are vulnerable, about children that they can have sex with, but who won't talk.
To what extent is it possible that his father's friends or any of his, if a circle of paedophile connections could have been responsible for Daniel's disappearance?
I think the coincidence of his father being a paedophile, that being hidden, and for the child to go missing is just too strong. It's too strong just for it to be a coincidence. I think it has to be linked in some way.
I've always felt for many years, and certainly in Britain, for many years, that the paedophile information exchange actually allowed paedophiles to be better organised than we were, the police. And so therefore I've always felt that paedophiles almost have to stick together, because it's not something you could just go and chat about in the pub, is it? So by virtue of the fact that they do need to stick together, I would find it, especially as he hid the fact, he wasn't open with the fact, was he? And he travelled down, I believe from Manchester, wasn't it, that he was convicted in. That in fact that would show a degree of secrecy. And so, therefore, I would believe he would have known other paedophiles in the area, because that's what tends to happen with paedophiles. They tend to, if you like, work together and know each other because they've all got the same sexual ambitions.
Ambitions, I believe, which may have been developed over a period of time.
I feel that this young man was probably groomed by one of the paedophiles that lived in that area. He was known to them. He was gradually groomed by them. I think that this is the case rather than a paedophile appearing on the bank holiday weekend and just snatching him.
Most children are murdered by somebody that they know. And in relation to Daniel Entwistle, we know that his father was a paedophile, had been part of a paedophile ring, and therefore it seemed much more likely that that is the circumstances. Pursuing that avenue is much more likely to deliver a result than anything else, unless, of course, eventually his body is found or the remains of his body are found so that they can be analysed to provide other kinds of forensic evidence.
This was a person who knew exactly what they were doing, targeted and whisked this little boy away. I cannot believe he would get into the car of a stranger. He was that streetwise. He just wouldn't. That wouldn't be Daniel. He would be too frightened. So he was either perhaps forced in, or horrifically, he knew the person who was taking him away.
It seems extraordinary to me that David Entwistle's paedophile past hadn't in some way been picked up by the authorities in the area, and that this wasn't seen as part of Daniel's overall vulnerability.
In the Daniel Entwistle case, there were 2 threats to that young man: the river and 5 known paedophiles living within that area. He was the perfect target to be snatched by a paedophile predator.
However, it's important to realise that there is a difference between a paedophile who clearly wants to groom a victim and then perhaps hide his activities, and a child murderer. Our experts tell us that paedophiles don't normally kill their victims.
The abduction and murder of children in our culture is incredibly rare. It doesn't mean to say that it can't happen. It does happen, regrettably. But by and large, children who are hurt, children who are raped, children who are murdered are damaged by people that they know.
So the possibility must still remain that Daniel was abducted and then killed, and that the motive wasn't in any way sexual. Having heard all of the evidence, what do my cold case team now believe is the truth underlying this case?
To know the innocence of a 7-year-old and to know how vulnerable they are, you know, he would have gone with somebody he knew. An adult could have done anything they wanted to him, and you just can't even bear to think what happened to him or how his life ended.
Regrettably, I wouldn't be confident that he is alive, and sadly, I don't believe that he would be found, which is dreadful for obviously his loved ones and his family.
The child was so young that he wouldn't have taken much convincing to get into a car with somebody he knew.
I've always leaned towards the fact that Daniel was probably taken by somebody who knew him, and that in fact that sadly they were paedophiles and took his life.
Because Daniel was never found, it's very difficult, obviously, for us to speculate as to what happened to him with no body. So in terms of location of where he disappeared and what happened to the body, we don't know. So it's very, very difficult even now.
children don't just go missing, do they? And anyone who has children of their own, you know, you can almost feel that sort of gut-wrenching sense of, you know, oh, this can't happen, we just want him to come back, we want him to be okay.
"12 years on, and what happened to 7-year-old Daniel Entwistle remains a mystery. Having been overshadowed by other high-profile disappearances like that of Madeleine McCann, what this case really needed was a fresh injection of interest. The case now has a new momentum, albeit for the wrong reasons. So what I've learned from all the evidence this disturbing case has thrown up is that Daniel's opportunities in life were limited from the outset. He came from a challenging environment, and there were very few people around the boy who were willing to support him. Regrettably, I have to assume that this led directly to the circumstances surrounding his tragic disappearance. The tale of Daniel Entwistle is a tragic one. Over the course of this investigation, I've come to realise that his vulnerability rested not only on where he lived, but also what he was allowed to do, the freedom he was given, and the people he was exposed to. My work and the work of my cold case team leads me to believe that he didn't die in an accident. He didn't drown in the River Yar. No body has ever surfaced to prove that theory. I believe that he was abducted by someone he knew or someone close to someone he knew. I believe that he spent his final hours as a victim of a sexual predator.